Hey folks, and welcome to Skeptic Voices, the brainstorm production that spends more time on getting to know the people in our community and less time on the issues. As skeptics, we spend more of our time learning about, debating, and educating than we do on other pursuits. But we're all still people with families, jobs, home lives, and other things we value. I want to spend a little bit of time each month with one of my favorite members of the skeptic community and get to know them on a more personal level, instead of just debating ideas. I'll interview a different person each month and hopefully learn something about them that I didn't know before. This month's interview was with Marissa Alexa McCool. She's the host of the Inciting Incident podcast and is a co-host on a whole swath of other shows. I'll try to provide links to all of them in the show notes. Marissa took time out of a very busy day to talk to me for an hour on the phone, and I really appreciate it. I feel like this is definitely a bit more of a personal interview than I've heard from her before, and that's exactly what I was hoping for. So here it is. I hope you enjoy it. My interview with Marissa Alexa McCool.
But nothing lasts forever. Here's to us. Here's to love.
I guess a good place to start is so if you were to introduce yourself to a new friend, what would be the way you would describe yourself?
Someone with way too many things on their whiteboard.
Yeah, that's a good start. So what is on that whiteboard?
Well, between classes, work, and whenever the kids start school, there's at least 3 interviews a week, and then at least 3 times I'm going to get interviewed in a week. Wow. So, all of that takes up a lot of time, hours and spots and all that good stuff. And then, there's time for homework. There's time for other writing projects. I write 2 columns a week. I write a blog. I'm working on another book. So it's, just my self projects alone sort of take up a good chunk of the time.
No kidding. Yeah. You, how many books have you written? 9
total, 4 since I came out. I don't really talk about the other 5 because, they're written under another name, and I don't like to talk about that name.
Yeah,
but
that's fair.
9 total. I finished a book, and then it got printed somewhere, and 4 people read it, so it counts for something.
Yeah, that's right. Is writing kind of your thing? Is that a way that you identify yourself as a writer?
Oh, absolutely, first and foremost. I've been writing stories since I was 4 or 5, back before I knew what plagiarism meant. Right. So, I would take stories that already existed and sort of tell my version of it or tell the way I wished it would have gone. And, I had a computer very early. I learned to type at 4. It was 1989, so not a lot of people had computers at all. So it worked out in that regard.
Right. The only one with a computer writing that early, eh?
Yeah, and whenever somebody watches me type and goes, God, how do you type so fast? I was like, I was taught early. Right. I don't even think about it now, but, I can average between 120, 125 words a minute. So
holy shit.
to other people, they look at my laptop and go, how is that thing not broken?
Right, eh? Yeah. Jeez. Is writing something that your parents really valued when you were growing up?
No, at least not doing it. I would say they're both very well read.
Okay.
My dad's more into the fiction, mass market bestseller kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
My mom has a little bit more of a variety, but even still, I was surrounded by books, but neither of my parents were creative types, to say the least. So wanting to pursue writing and wanting to pursue that sort of thing was never really understood between me and my parents, or me and most of my family for that matter. So
I guess creativity wasn't a genetic trait then. It was something that you learned.
I always joke, I don't look like anybody in my family physically.
Is that right?
Yeah, my parents are both, under 6 feet tall and stocky and big boned, and my sister's 5'6". And then there's me, over 6 feet tall and skinny. So You know,
Wow.
it was always like, I bet the mailman was tall and skinny.
Yeah, I bet, eh?
Yeah, so that kind of represented the difference between me and the rest of them. I mean, my sister sort of got more into the creative aspect of things later, but growing up, you know, it was those three and then me. And, you know, I was interested in the arts and acting and writing and books, and Dad's an engineer, Mom's a social scientist. It didn't mesh. You're taking something creative in school, aren't you? Or you did take drama or film or something? Yeah, I took a lot of creative things in school. I just graduated from Penn with 3 degrees in English, cinema, and anthropology. And I've studied film, theater, literature, writing, even in the communication theory and stuff like that, because it helps shape my ability to create like realistic characters and scenarios. Because when I learn what people act like and how they communicate and what they do in given situations, it's much easier to create a character that people can connect with.
So I guess the anthropology kind of helps with that then.
Certainly. I've never done any actual field work or anything, but just studying people who have and what they've discovered, not to mention opening yourself up to people who are really not like yourself. That alone gives you a sense of empathy for not pigeonholing yourself or, you know, pulling a John Hughes and making everything that you ever create be white, rich people in Chicago.
Yeah, it does seem a little limiting, doesn't it?
Yeah, so you know, even within the 2 novels I've written, one took place in a specific area, one didn't. And I just try to tell different stories. I mean, you know, the story arc itself may not be that unfamiliar, but I think my take on how people act and how they treat each other is pretty unique, which makes sense given that I had a very unique, not only childhood, but I would say my 20s, very unique.
So what would you say was unique about your childhood?
Like I said, you know, before I didn't fit in with anybody, let alone my family. I was kind of put on independent study as a kid in elementary school because I hate saying this, I sound arrogant, but I was so far ahead of everybody that I was bored.
Oh, okay.
So they just kind of said, here, go do what you want for about 5 years. And surprisingly, that didn't do me well once I got to junior high.
Right.
Because I didn't learn how to do anything. So I was essentially thrown to the wolves and I never really recovered. But, you know, I was always in the theater, always creating, always writing especially. I mean, even in middle school, I wrote a short story that the teacher sent to the president. That was President Clinton at the time. So, you know, I never stopped pursuing those things, but I really distanced myself.
Do you remember what that story was about?
Vaguely. Not enough to, like, give a synopsis.
Not enough to, like, fill me in on it?
No. But, you know, it was 6th grade, so I have a pretty good idea of what it might have contained, you know. Mostly wish fulfillment, shall we say.
Right.
It's like, hey, could I not get my ass kicked when I come to school once in a while? That'd be great.
That would be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Being a visibly feminine kid in the late 90s wasn't exactly the chic thing to be.
I suppose, geez. I was just talking to Trav, and they said that they had been subjected to a lot of bullying growing up, too. Like, is that something that I don't know, is that something that everybody who grows up to be a smart intellectual activist has to go through, or is that...
I don't think those things necessarily. It depends on the stage of the anti-intellectualism and the modern psyche.
Right.
It's like, right now, it's, well, I don't know anything about this, but my opinion's just as important. And I can imagine those people who are like, how about some Asimov for you? You know, not faring so well probably, but it goes in stages. 5 years ago, it was a lot more in, so to speak. So it's it's hard to categorize.
I guess it comes in waves, eh?
Yeah, and I can't really speak to others' experience. That wasn't the reason that I dealt with it. It was more of the perceived, shall we say.
Yeah, I suppose, eh?
Yeah. Even before I was out or knew what it was, I was clearly feminine and clearly I didn't understand male bonding. I still don't. I never wanted anything to do with it. And that, of course, made me an outcast and made me ostracized. Because even back then, I don't know if it's still like this now, but gym classes were segregated by gender or, appearing gender.
I think many are still like that.
Yeah, but, so, there were those periods of times a day where I was just, kept with men, and I couldn't relate to them at all, and I didn't really want much to do with them.
Right.
So they, of course, kicked my ass for it, because God forbid you be different. Right.
Did your parents acknowledge your femininity growing up?
Sort of. I always joke that they always knew I was LGBT, but they got the letter wrong. Oh. Growing up, especially in my teens, like they were so convinced that I was gay that they would set me up with their gay coworkers or their gay friends and have them like try to mentor me. And that was nice, but it was like, I know I'm different, but I'm not different like that.
It was just missing, eh?
Yeah, it was, a letter off or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
But of course, at that point in time, I didn't really know about the other options. It was just gay or straight, and that's it. I mean, a certain amount of people were growing up and didn't even know what gay was. So I mean, it was forward, but not really. I just kind of had to use the words for how I felt, even though they weren't the right or most accurate ones, because they were all I knew.
Yeah. I suppose I know I've talked to you about this before, but do you want to kind of explain, or can you maybe explain a little bit of how you learned what the right words were?
Sure. Well, I was first given the name almost by accident of Marissa when I was 18. And that was about 2002, 2003. And it was from somebody wanting me to pretend to be their girlfriend. And the name just kind of stuck. But at the time, I used the word drag queen because that was all I knew for someone who was born a certain way and wanted to present another.
Right.
And it wasn't until I was about 25 that I came out that way. And a friend of mine, pointed me toward this thing called the Queer Dictionary and said, I think you should look at this because this doesn't sound like you. Maybe there's something in there that might speak to you more because, cross-dressing is just maintaining the identity that you already had and just occasionally presenting otherwise. And it seems like it's much more of who you are. And that's different. I'm not telling you which one it is or that you're wrong, but maybe you've not been exposed to this before.
Right.
And once I was, everything started to make more sense, especially internally. And, I was always afraid to go the whole way, so to speak, to come out as transgender because of all the societal implications of the circumstances in which I was at the current time.
Right.
Just various factors sort of contributed to that. So once I eliminated those factors and stopped caring about them, stopped worrying about them, sort of knocked them down by one, that was when I first admitted it to myself before anybody else, of course.
Right. So what were some of the factors that held you back?
Well, at the time, I didn't have custody of my kids. They were being raised by my ex-wife, who she herself probably wouldn't care too much, but the rest of her family was super religious, super conservative. Her mother and I once got into a screaming match in the middle of the street because she thought I should attend Joyce Meyer Ministries.
Oh, no.
And was yelling at me that gay was a choice and didn't appreciate the fact that I was very vocal about my support of the gay community.
Oh,
and didn't go well, so I wasn't exactly expecting a well of support there. So I was like, can't come out because if I do, I'll never see the kids again. Or
right, yeah, that'd be
at the time.
Yeah, that's it's a terrible space to be in, eh?
Yes, and I was also working at a suit store in a very conservative area with mostly middle-aged white conservative men, and the things they would say about pretty much anybody who wasn't one of those things kind of scared me away from it. You know, it was my means of support, and as important, it was my means of paying child support, which kept me out of jail, which that would have opened up another can of worms that would have been extremely uncomfortable. So I was really stuck, and there were a couple times that I talked myself out of it, at least for a little while, where it was just like, it's not going to happen, or I'm afraid to let it happen, or no one will ever accept me if I do, or I'll screw my whole life up if I come out and be open. And just one by one, it stopped mattering, or at least I don't even know if it stopped mattering, but I couldn't lie anymore.
Right.
I couldn't pretend to be something I wasn't any longer, because I would spend more time as myself. I would spend more time presenting the way I wanted to and being referred to the way I wanted to, and, you know, associating myself, my identity, my clothes with being who I truly was. And at one point it was just call me whatever I'm presenting as. And then very slowly it became, no, don't call me he, don't call me my old name, don't call me anything like that. Don't associate me with the male pronoun whatsoever.
So you said you have an ex-wife. How many kids do you have?
I have 2 kids that live with me. I have an older son from, I don't even want to say a previous relationship, but a encounter that resulted in having an older son. He lives in Pennsylvania, and his mother's kind of a hermit, so she, you know, sometimes she'll communicate with me, sometimes she'll disappear for 6 months.
Oh,
so there's a very distant connection there. I'm not exactly proud of it, but, you know, she's married and the kid's taken care of, and I, of course, pay to support and whatever. But the 2 kids I have custody of and live with, I have a 10-year-old son and a 9-year-old daughter, and they live with me 100% of the time. So long story short, you know, what I was saying earlier about how at the time I didn't have them, I do now.
That's awesome. As a parent myself, I can attest to how awesome it is to have your kids around. So it's it feels good to have them with you when you need them, and
it really does. And to have a say in the information that they're taking in, you know, that's a big thing for me, because before I had custody of them, even around my parents, they would say things that I didn't like and didn't appreciate. And my mom would kind of look at me and say, well, you don't have full custody, so you don't get to have a say in that. And
right.
once I did, I still let the grandmother take them to church once in a while, at least for when I was still living in Pennsylvania. But the longer I got them away from it, the less they wanted to go.
Right.
And even, you know, my son has gotten into skating atheist.
Nice.
So, you know, the other day, I can remember a time where we would discuss Noah's Ark, and he would tell me why he thought it was real. And the other day we were having a talk of why none of this makes sense. It's complete bullshit, isn't it? It's like, yeah, right. I like the way you're thinking now, you know? And I was super proud of him a couple weeks ago, because he's really into tech and online stuff, you know, way beyond my ability to understand. But
right.
he showed us an app or something that he was using where I guess an LGBT person was feeling down or feeling like they were worthless, or, you know, something like that. And he sent them a message and really reached out to support this person. And I was just so goddamn proud of that kid. Like,
awesome.
You know, that just being around us, what we do, and hearing the things that I've talked about, because I don't shield him from everything
right.
that I deal with, but I try to limit just how much negativity he gets to see. But he's perceptive as hell, and has sort of taken what he's learned and uses it to help other people. And, I didn't make him do that. And it was
right.
just one of those moments of, I am so goddamn proud of you, kid.
Yeah, that's a great parenting moment when you realize that you are raising a genuinely good person.
Yeah. Not that he wasn't before, but maybe some of those instincts weren't being encouraged, shall we say?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think my kids are good people, but when it's a different thing when they actually demonstrate it to the outside world, right?
Oh, of course. Everybody has a preference for, their own. And I'm kind of in that space of, if I didn't already have kids, I never would have. And I'm looking forward to getting the ones I have to college and out of the house. Because my youngest is 9. I'm halfway there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
They'll be out before I'm 40. It's all good.
Yeah.
Some of the grandparents keep saying to me and Aiden, like, we want grandchildren. And we're like, you going to take care of them? Because we're not doing this shit over again.
Right. No kidding. Yeah. It's enough work as it is, eh?
Yeah. Yeah. They're 9 and 10. They go to school. They're very independent. We make them dinner and help them with their schoolwork and maintain their schedule. But I can't imagine going back to changing diapers and, waking up in the middle of the night and, going through that whole period again.
No way.
Especially with how busy I already am.
Right.
And, of course, there's the fact that both me and my husband are trans, and pretty soon it's not even going to be physically possible. Right, although I suppose the adoption option would always be there. But I think it's once he and I got custody, we went from we should have our own to no, we're good.
Yeah. How do you balance parenting and activism and school?
I have what I call my internal itinerary, and it's not just for keeping track of time, it's for keeping track of everything. Right. So, let's just say you were telling me the story right now. I would sort of be internally writing things down of like when things happened and what attributes pertain to you. And that's just how I sort of keep track from a psychological point of view. But, I have the whiteboard. I tend to section things out very specifically. Most of the time I don't do interviews back to back, but sometimes that's just unavoidable with schedules. Right. But, I prioritize, and then I make specific time for specific things, specific people. Aiden and I always have our time, and then my partner and I always have our time. Kids and I always have our time, but then I make sure show gets posted, show gets recorded, homework gets done. I block out, obviously, when I'm at school, except for this as an exception because I was really interested in participating. But
I appreciate that.
I think it's just the fact that I've been multitasking and busy for so long that I don't know how to do anything else.
Right. If you don't have to schedule it, then you free spare time doesn't exist, eh?
Oh, totally not. There are some times where somebody will be like, when are you free? And I say, you're going to have to narrow it down more than that. Give me a day, give me a period of time, give me something to work with here, because here's my schedule. Now, can you find an opening in there? There's some people that I know that I schedule 3 to 4 weeks out with just because it's like, okay, we're both free on the 12th. Let's do the 12th.
Right, yeah.
From like 5:37 to 7:38. How about that?
Yeah. We can do a coffee at this time, and then I'll see you in 2 months.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's just the reality.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm in grad school. I have 5 podcasts now.
Wow.
I appear, like I said, on at least 3 a week for the most part. And then, all that alone adds up to a lot. So social time is often very much, I'm free Thursday after 10. You want to go to this? Or
yeah.
So yeah. I won't say it's not. I won't say it's easy, but I will say it requires more than. Oh yeah, we'll just hang out when we feel like it. No, that never happens.
Yeah. How many? You said you have 5 podcasts. I think I know about 2.
Yeah. Main one, of course, is the Inciting Incident podcast, by far the most popular.
Right.
And then I have sort of the parody satire show with Ari Stillman, The Sister
Right.
Getting Out of Hand. That one's
I've seen
play recently.
some fragile cis feelings are hurt over that one sometimes.
Oh, yeah. My general response to that whenever someone says it is, first of all, obviously you didn't get the joke. And second of all, yeah, but not so funny when it happens to you, is it?
Yeah, exactly.
But, that show, it's entirely sarcastic by nature, but the idea is to flip the situation around and have people confront it from that point of view. Because, the whole point of the show is we're non-cis, everybody we have on is non-cis, and all the topics we discuss are also that way.
Right.
So, sometimes people think, well, why don't you discuss other things? It's like, you can go anywhere for that.
Yeah, that's right.
How many trans exclusive shows do you know about? Like, how many trans podcasters at all do you know about? So it's not for everybody, but there are certainly cis and straight people that enjoy it and listen to it and are in on the joke, and we make it for them.
Right.
We don't make it for the people who don't get it, and not everybody gets that, and that's fine.
Yeah.
My husband started his own show about 2-3 months ago. It's called FTM for Trans Men.
Oh,
and it's
yeah,
sort of
I remember seeing that.
Yeah, it's not quite like the show with me and Ari. It's more informational and serious. But even within the trans community, there's a real lack of trans masculine and trans men representation.
Right.
Because some people don't even think trans exists outside of male to female. So I kind of play the clueless idiot on that show to sort of, be like, well, tell me about this, because I don't understand why anyone would willfully inject themselves with testosterone. That's weird.
Right.
Then I co-host Doubting Dogma with Molly and Norman, who's been on, or at least had the tag on Scathing a couple weeks ago, and interviewed Noah naturally at the time that I couldn't get there. But, I've interviewed Noah a couple times now, so I think he's had enough time to put up with me.
Right.
And then I just started releasing my audiobooks in podcast form under the name Storytime with Rissy.
Okay.
Because I was recording my audiobooks, especially the most recent one, A Voice in the Dark. And because of the way the book's set up with changing perspectives very quickly, quick chapters, I was just recording in 20-minute segments as opposed to like chapter 1, chapter 2. And
right.
And I got up to 10 tracks, I think, and I was only about halfway through, but I was recording for Audible and posting it as I go, because, you can't get done until you're done with the whole project.
Right.
And I sort of just put it out there like, would anybody listen to this if I put it out in podcast form too? And the response was overwhelmingly positive. So
wow.
I just kind of, opened up a separate folder on the Spreaker account, posted the first 4 tracks, and now I have 5.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. I have 6 weeks head start on that, so it's not as urgent. And I think Bethany and I on the Inciting Incident podcast are recorded 3 weeks out now at this point. So getting things moved ahead a little bit sort of gives us some room to play with.
Yeah, you got it all lined up at least.
Yeah, definitely. If like yesterday where I was just not in a good space for recording and hosting, I canceled 2 interviews, but we had already recorded the week's show for The Sister Getting Out of Hand, and we had already recorded at least 2 or 3 Inciting Incident episodes in advance, so it didn't hurt anything. It just cut into the wiggle room that we have, which is what's that designed for in the first place.
Right. So what do you do when you're not podcasting or audiobooking or like, do you have hobbies or just spare time every now and then?
I do. I don't feel like a lot of what I do is work because I love doing it. But, it does take energy and effort, and a lot of it is for other people as much as it is myself. But when I need to get away and do things for me, usually me and Aiden or me and my partner or all 3 of us and the kids or, some combination thereof, we'll go up to the North Shore in Minnesota. And like next weekend, we're going up to the Boundary Waters region in which is near Ely, Minnesota, which is close to you guys, or at least that wide, vast country that you occasionally populate. And
yeah.
So, we're going to spend a weekend up there. There's almost no cell signal. There's almost no Wi-Fi signal. So it's sort of a decompression recharge time.
Right, eh?
And what I like to do in those kind of times is take my very, very, very nice camera and go to pretty places and, take a lot of pictures. Nice. But I also have a specific fondness for not just railroads, but abandoned railroads. And
cool.
When I need a few hours to just get away and to focus on something that's entirely for me, what I like to do is follow old abandoned railroad tracks or trails and see where they go.
Nice,
and
nice.
That's something that's just, other people enjoy it, other people see it, but it's not for them. That one's for me.
Right.
That's just something that I enjoy.
Yeah, we used to. I used to work out around roads that have nobody going down them quite a bit,
mm-hmm.
and then so we'd see these abandoned old houses, and we'd always stop and we'd spend an hour sometimes just wandering through these old abandoned houses and seeing what everything looked like and like kind of the workmanship of it. And I mean, you can't do anything with that, but it's kind of just neat to spend time on it.
Well, sure. I like to document it. I kind of got started with that because my great-grandfather worked on the railroad. And when his wife passed away a couple of years ago, my great-grandmother, I had grown up with stories about how the railroad tracks went right through their backyard, and he would just get on the train and go to work. And I was with my parents, and they were like, "You want to see the old house?" Sure. When else am I going to come back to this nowhere town? So when I got there, the tracks were being torn up, and I just started taking pictures of it because I realized if I had even come a week later, it'd probably be gone. And
right.
That was a not only a part of my past, but one of the few connections that I have to my family's past, because we're not that close, as I've previously said. So
right.
That was something I kind of hung on to. And then I found this Facebook page called Abandoned Rails, and I posted it and then started seeing all the other people who document that kind of stuff. Some of them are former railroad workers. Some of them are just rail fans in general. And for me, it just became a kind of thing of capturing something past its use, but that is still there and most people don't even know about. And also capturing it before somebody tears it all up and it's gone. Because once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting that you kind of found this little secret community for this thing that you do for yourself, and it's like, that's really neat.
Yeah, it's I was always obsessed with trains when I was a little kid. Like, a lot of little kids are obsessed with those, but given that I didn't get to grow up the correct way and that I didn't get to be who I really was, I kind of rediscovered that love for trains at about the same time I rediscovered who I really was. And, any trans person will tell you going on hormones kind of kickstarts a second puberty.
Okay.
So, there's this youthful feeling of change and this rediscovery and this rediscovering of your identity. And I got to experience it at the same time with something that connected me to the first time and was one of the few positive things that I associated it with. So it's a youthful, energetic feeling over something that doesn't cause harm to anybody else or doesn't require anybody else to participate. And, just I act a lot younger than I am. I turned 32 in 2 weeks, but most people who spend time around me go, "How do you have so much fucking energy?"
That's all right. That's good. 32 is pretty young though, so.
Yeah. You would say that until you come to like where I'm standing right now, and everybody walking by me is almost half my age.
Yeah, I suppose.
And I feel it every second that I'm here.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. I was just in a class today where the professor was saying, none of you remember having to go to Blockbuster. And I'm like, I worked at Blockbuster.
Actually, I do remember that.
Quite vividly.
Oh, that's great. Sometimes I revel in being old, though.
It really hit a couple years ago in a class where the opening statement was, "None of you were old enough to remember 9/11," and I went, "I was in high school."
Yeah. I was an adult when 9/11 happened. So.
Yeah, there you go. So it's interesting, those little moments that aren't as ubiquitous as we once thought they were.
Yeah, no kidding. Hey.
Yeah.
Yeah, even my girlfriend is 32, and
okay.
So there's 8 years between us, and so sometimes some of the references I have in my head, she just doesn't get them. And and that's only 8 years, and we're both adults. Like, I can't imagine what it would be like trying to relate to a 20-year-old.
Yeah, I can relate to that too, because I'm 32. I'm 7 years older than Aiden, so
right.
There's of course stuff that was missed in that aspect too. But when it's someone you don't know, when it's someone you're just in class with, you don't have that connection or that reason to sort of empathize.
Right.
Because college is just, hey, we're studying the same thing, so let's be in the same place, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. We're just people being in the same place.
Yeah, and for the most part, they're all the same age, and then once in a while, there's the old lady of the group that comes in, and it's just like, yeah, you probably can't tell, but I have kids that are like closer to your age than you are to me. So,
right. Yeah. So, what are you going to do? How many more years do you have school for?
Well, I literally just started grad school, and the average trajectory for that is 2 years.
Okay.
And there's no PhD for what I want to do at this school, so I'll probably go to another school in Minnesota for my PhD in English and writing.
Nice.
And the reason I'm doing that is so I can get qualified to be a professor, in case all of the aforementioned projects don't become entirely self-sufficient. And even if they do, it's something else to do.
Right.
So my goal, at least as of late, has always been keep pursuing my own business as hard as I can, but have that backup. And when my backup is essentially the same thing in a different way, it feels like it works together. It's not like I go to
right.
school studying one thing and then I go, oh, I can think about books now. Like it's
right.
Like same frame of mind.
No, that's cool.
Yeah, everything kind of worked out that way. I didn't know where I was going for a while with that, but now it's all sort of come together.
But no, actually, I got a friend who he studied philosophy, and I always thought that he would go and be a professor. Like, being a professor is I don't know, kind of an actual, I don't know, a huge goal. I always imagined it that way anyway.
Yeah, there are certain subjects that people only associate with becoming a professor for, like sociology or philosophy,
right?
Political science. It's like, what does this qualify you to do? It qualifies you to teach it.
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
Yeah, and some people would say the same thing about what I'm doing, but I'm also just trying to be the person who writes the books as opposed to the person who reads and analyzes and helps explain them. So it works pretty well.
That's cool. So I guess just more on a more personal, less, I guess, what do you want to do when you grow up kind of mentality.
Yeah.
Like, what do you listen to for music, or what do you watch on TV?
I don't have a lot of time for TV.
I suppose not.
Outside of like Game of Thrones or the sports game that's on for the week. I spent 2 years working for the school in college football for the last 2 years, so I have an interest in that. And
okay.
Even if I'm not able to watch, I'll still follow. And I'm from Cleveland, so there's that alliance. There's always someone I'm following that time of whatever time of year it is too. Outside of that, though, the media that I engage with is usually books and podcasts.
Right.
I consume way more podcasts than I'm on, surprisingly, and I geez. Ridiculously. I think I'm on my 60th book of the year or something.
Holy
yeah, like it was kind of fun for my first class today, because the chapter they had us read, like the book that we were reading from sourced 3 different books, and I had 2 of them. So nice. I was able to bring in 2 of them as a counterpoint and be like, well, this is actually what the thing says. I don't know if he understands the source material that well.
Right. He's misinterpreted the source material.
Right. So, there's that. Listening to podcasts. As far as music goes, I'm sort of all over the map, but it's something like I either like it or I don't. So I can't really narrow down by genre.
Oh, okay.
It's more if it captures me or if I have some kind of attachment to it, that's when it sticks with me. A great example is I have an ex-girlfriend that I haven't spoken to in 3 years, but she introduced me to Anne Boleyn, so I still listen to Anne Boleyn, nice. And I have that association with it. That's an example. But as far as like classifying it goes, I wouldn't even know where to start. There are a lot of female-led bands that I really enjoy. School of Seven Bells, Florence and the Machine, Nightwish.
Florence and the Machine is one of my favorites, actually.
Well, there you go. And like anything that's really intricate, I like. Dream Theater is probably one of my favorites in that aspect, and
nice.
And Muse, and sort of that prog / psychedelic kind of thing, but not anything that goes way off the deep end. And something else I spend a lot of time with is scores, whether that be from movies, TV shows, or even the occasional game, even though I'm not a gamer. Generally, when I'm writing something, I will find a movie score that fits the mood that fits what I'm writing, and I'll listen to that while I write. Because nice. There's no words, so it's not conflicting with what the monologue is in my head at the time.
That's interesting. That sounds like a good tool to use.
Yeah, like for instance, my most recent book, Voice in the Dark, it's, I don't want to say it's somber, but it's a bit melancholic at times. And I listened to the Silent Hill soundtrack while I was writing it.
Oh, neat.
So it kind of, I wouldn't even say it directly set the mood, but it definitely influenced it. So that was a nice little tool. And like I said, if I'm writing or reading, I can't listen to anything with words because the two will sort of clash. So I have a huge library of movie scores and other instrumental works.
That's awesome. I don't know. I tend to listen to music that's got lyrics, right? So it's movie scores. Unless something really grabs me, then I haven't really listened to a lot of them.
Yeah, that's something you should check out. Like next time you're at a movie, like pay attention to the score, because a lot of the times with me, I'll be able to listen to that scene with, the score that was used in that scene, and I can recapture that emotion that I had while watching it.
Right.
There are movies I haven't. Okay. You know how like the first time you see a movie, you have a reaction to it, and then you never get that feeling back. Like you never have that second time through. You still know what's going to happen. As much as you may love it, there's always that I've seen it before. So
right. Yeah, I suppose.
I have found that if a movie with a really good score connects with me, that I can relive that feeling, even if it's only for a few minutes. So it's a way to sort of preserve the emotion that a piece of work can bring out of you. And as much time as I spent studying movies, that's a good thing to have, because after 4 years of taking cinema classes, I can't even tell you the last movie I saw or wanted to.
Right.
I think with the new Kingsman movie coming out, I think I'm going to go see that. And I think that's also the last movie I saw in theaters, when the first one came out. So that gives you an idea of how much time I spend at the multiplex.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to be the old guy who bitches about the price of everything, but who can afford to go to the movies now?
If I go, it's by myself or with one of my partners. It's definitely not with the kids, because then it's at least 3 or 4 tickets, and then I want a snack, I want a drink, and that adds up quickly.
I think the last time I took the kids to the movie, it cost us $70, including the ticket, like the tickets, and then the snacks, and
yeah, and I'm not even that hard off as far as finances go, but that's a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah.
You know, even when I took them to a baseball game a couple weeks ago, and like just the tickets alone, that adds up. And then it kind of had to be okay, you better eat now because we're not paying $5 for a fucking hot dog. It's not going to happen.
Right.
Sure enough, like within the first hour, I'm hungry. Tough.
Right.
We told you. We warned you.
Yeah. You should have eaten before.
Yep. Not paying $5 for a hot dog. I don't care how good it is.
Yeah, that's right.
We can go home and buy a pack of hot dogs for less than that.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I guess what is something that you like really value beyond, I mean, obviously activism is so important to you. Your family is very important to you. Like, is there something else that you like really grab onto that is super important to you?
Well, there are byproducts of those things.
Yeah.
The biggest one being the trans kids that reach out to me, or the parents or friends of those trans kids who
right.
Didn't feel like they previously had a voice or someone they could relate to, and now they do. And that's, I have that in common with Callie. Those are the experiences that keep us going through the times that are rather rough. And bringing visibility to the issues is more important than just making it easier. It's so that those kids don't have to deal with that, the same things that we did. If we can do anything to sort of pave the road a little bit better for them, that's one of the biggest things that I'm really passionate about. And that's why I speak out so loudly and so often about it, because the more we talk about it, the more we normalize it. And it's not like, eventually gender won't matter or something, but sort of coming out about being trans or being gay or being anything is as casual as I'm taking a cooking class, and the reaction to that is, right. Oh, okay, and it's the same thing with us. That's all you really need. And so I understand there's a period of an adjustment depending on how long you know the person. Like, oh well, I'll have to get used to calling you that name, and I got to switch the pronouns and everything. But it shouldn't be anything more than that. And the more people see us just existing and being in everyday life, the easier it's going to be, and the more people it's going to be normalized to, because it's scary in a lot of places, and I'm one of the lucky ones. So that's something that I really, really try to focus on hard. But if we're talking outside of that, love books, as I said. I go through books like candy. I have 10 full bookshelves of books, and just bookstores are my kryptonite. If there's a used bookstore, you might as well check out for like 2-3 hours, because it's going to be a while.
Right.
I found a really nice one in Chicago when I was there for Live Gam, and I found just some of these ridiculously awesome signed books. I think I found one by President Jimmy Carter.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, where am I going to find that at a regular bookstore? So it's neat. I just like getting lost in places like that, or like I said, with trails. I don't know where they're going, so I follow them to see where they go. Because I could look at a map, but it's not the same thing.
So almost like you're an explorer of a sort, like it's discovering new things or old things that nobody's seen for a long time.
And when I do that, especially when I'm following a trail, it'll be like inside, I'll be imagining what it used to look like, and the trains that used to come down there, and the people that used to ride them, or the people that used to work on them. It's like, lives were built in this place. People went back and forth. People used this. People made a living here, and now nobody knows it's here. Right. And I realize there's a certain level of technological advancement that comes along with progressing technology, and that's fine, and that's just the way of the world. But I try to think about the people who once, put everything they have in something like that. Either working or using it for travel, or, the people who made the rails, the people who made the cars, the people who made the engines, the people who mapped that kind of stuff out and planned it. It's like all that stuff kind of goes through my head as I go and take pictures of it, because they're now relics and they're forgotten about. And I don't know. I don't really have a spiritual sense in any regard, but I also feel like if I document that and sort of show a small way that it's still there and somebody notices,
right.
like it's a small part of keeping that past alive, I suppose.
I think that's a fair way to look at it.
Yeah, there's scenic railroads and things like that sort of have preserved
right.
old cars and old tracks. There's one right here in Duluth, which is where I go to school. It goes up about 26 miles a couple times a day, and it's really neat. But that's one of the better ones. There are some that just don't exist, and there are some that maybe they'll go a quarter mile or something. And I'm glad those things are being preserved, but there are an awful lot more that don't. There's one right near my house, ironically, that goes to, like, the plant's all torn down, but all the railroad tracks that went there are still there. The crossing lights are still up, and there's 4 tracks, and they're paved over on the road, and it's like we could utilize that for some kind of public transport to connect to the network, or
right,
we could utilize that somehow. It's just sitting there, and it makes me sad.
Sometimes the way that society progresses, almost like it skips over certain possibilities.
Mm-hmm. Especially in that regard, because other countries have sort of fallen in with the modern day railroads, the high speed bullet trains, and we're like, no, we like our 1950s Amtrak that's never on time and goes slower than cars. Let's have more of that. Let's not have
right.
anything that like improves. Let's not do that.
Yeah.
It's like my commute, if I had a bullet train, I could make it in a half hour. Instead, it's like a 2-hour drive. And
Jeez,
it would be nice if you could reach farther distances in a way that didn't involve, like, the TSA, for instance.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Not that us trans people have any specific issue with the TSA. Not whatsoever.
Not. Well, right on. So I guess, what do you like to read, or do you just cover all the genres? Like,
I definitely there are genres I don't read very much. But I do read a lot of fiction. I'm not really into horror movies or anything. I don't particularly like being scared. But the contemporaries, the classics. I really like realism. Sort of the things that I could see happening. And if I step outside realism, it's sort of magical realism, or something like Game of Thrones, where it's the supernatural is not all the time. It's just saved for the bigger moments, where
right.
for the most part, it's just, realistic people that you can relate to. They just happen to be dragons. So
that's cool. Right?
Outside of that, fiction, I love Rainbow Rowell. She's probably my favorite right now.
Okay.
Neil Gaiman, Kurt Vonnegut. I found a new one. I think her name is Mary Cabito, something like that.
Okay.
She did a book called The Good Girl that I really liked. But I read so much that I couldn't even name everything I've read this year, let alone in general.
Right.
And then as far as nonfiction goes, really like certain kinds of history books. Definitely heavy in sociology, anthropology, gender studies, things like that, trans narratives, obviously. And, I have my fair share of skeptic books,
right.
biographies. So it's, some ways it's all over the place, but there's also sections of the bookstore I don't visit, westerns,
yeah.
Religious, obviously, cookbooks, true crime, things like that.
Self-help.
Yeah, that too. And I don't put down anybody who reads it, but there's just certain things I like to read and certain things I don't.
Yeah.
And I don't feel the need to spend a lot of time trying to find new things, because there are so many within the parameters that I've set. There's
right.
probably several hundred books that I have still to go through that I haven't read yet, and I'm always getting more. So there's no real pressure to sort of branch out from what I consider to be a pretty wide net as it is.
Right. Yeah. I might finish a book a year. So So I don't branch out of past the skepticism stuff at all.
Oh, sure. Everybody has their things, and that's okay.
Yeah. All right, Gumby, he's on the main show with me.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of jokes because he reads a ton as well. Like he probably reads a book a week. And so he kind of jokes with me that I need to read more. And I said, wow, who's got the time? I spend my time, like, when I relax, I'm watching TV. So
sure. We all have our escapism. We all have our
that's right.
Sort of relax and recharge things that, I encourage anybody to, do the things they're passionate about and do the things that they enjoy, especially in times like this when it's so hard for so many people, especially in my community.
Right.
It's like, if you want to watch an extra show on Netflix, go for it. If you want an extra cookie, take it. Just do the little things that make you happy, because that's how we survive times like this, where we're targets, where we're in danger, where, anytime 45 says something awful about us, it's sure to restart every shitty conversation that people have had about us and bring it all to the surface yet again. And, even today I saw another one of those, I identify as attack helicopter. And we're like, oh, you're so funny. Oh my God. We've never heard that one before. You're so clever.
Right. Actually, I listened to, the Gatheist Manifesto there, a few weeks ago, and they had the sharks don't get cancer or whatever episode.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about, actually, in a weird way, there are people who identify with the things that they like. They, the other kin stuff really, that episode really made me go, oh, wow. So maybe judging people who identify as animals or fantasy creatures isn't, they're not people to be made fun of. This is something that they just really enjoy, or they identify in this way. It's not the same as being transgender, but it is an identity that they that helps them be who they are. And I don't see anything wrong with that.
I don't either. That's not something I particularly understand, but it's, I would be a hypocrite if I was to turn around and slam another group of people while advocating for others. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the people who choose to mock us
that's right.
by saying things like that. That's the difference. If you really like cats and you feel like, you kind of associate with being a cat, I don't care. It doesn't affect anything. It's
those same people that use the attack helicopter joke. They like to they really the ones I've met have really taken that other kin stuff, and they've just they spend so much time ridiculing it that it's just because they can't even grasp the idea of other transgender, let alone other kid, right?
Sure. And there's a point where you realize that you could either listen to somebody's story and learn something, or at least acknowledge that there are people different than you, right. Or you can just blow them off and make fun of them. And what I really hate is I see the backlash of a lot of that, and I see the people who are affected. They're in my inbox every day,
right?
And it's like, you don't have to get it. You don't have to be able to put yourself in those shoes. But generally, if someone tells you to call them something, just call them the thing. Is that really the biggest deal and the reason that everything's wrong in the world? Even if you even if you don't agree with it, whenever someone tries to say that to me, it's like, well, my ID says it, my birth certificate says it, my social security card says it, my bank cards say it, and everybody calls me that. So what are you going to do? Say, well, your old forwarded mail that still comes in every now and then has that old name on it, so that's what I'm going to call you. It's like, you're really, really grasping for straws at this point. Why don't you just say you're a bigot?
Right. Just embrace that part.
Yeah. Because you're not fooling anybody with this apologetic bullshit.
Yeah, because it's all just excuses anyway.
Mm-hmm. I could learn something and be kind to another person, but I'm not going to, and I'm going to try to justify that.
Yeah,
no,
that's right.
Just shut the fuck up.
Yeah, it's. I guess we got onto an issues tangent.
Oh, that's okay. It's hard to separate that from, my life because I spend so much time with it.
Yeah,
so I don't really find that distinction very much. I mean, of course, there's stuff in my life that's not the podcasts and not the books I write, but it's still such a big part that I can't really section it off either.
Yeah, I imagine like when you're so deep into activism, I guess I have something similar. Like when people ask me what I do, like I don't talk about my job. I talk about skepticism. So
yeah,
it's a similar thing.
Sure. And, there's the trans activism I do, the LGBT stuff in general, and then, of course, atheism and, normalizing that and fighting against religions taking things over. So I have my hat in multiple places, shall we say. So when I'm so spread out as it is, even though I have a couple of, I guess some people would call it primary focuses, there's still so much of it that's a part of my life that I don't feel like I can separate it most of the time. Even when I'm going to go up north next weekend with the kids and my husband and my partner. And even when I'm up there, I'll turn off social media, I'll disconnect, but at the same time, I'll probably be thinking of ideas to write for a new book or a new blog or, just jotting stuff down. So
yeah, you can't turn it off, eh?
No. I admire the people who can just completely disassociate. I am not one of them.
Yeah. Are you guys going to be camping?
No, there's a cabin resort up there. We went up there for our 1-year anniversary, and it was kind of the thing of, well, let's take the kids this time. And also because my partner just moved to the area, it's like, well, you should see northern Minnesota too, so come with us.
Nice. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm not a total city slicker, but when we went up there last year, there was no running water and no bathroom, so it was just kind of like, yeah, I like the peace and quiet, but can we step it up just a little? Can we have a stove? Can we have a toilet? Using the outhouse with all the mosquitoes up there that time of year, not the most pleasant experience.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and then you got to have a flashlight in the middle of the night.
Oh yeah, which is so much fun with my husband. Just sneaking up on him in the middle of the night. that was a lot of fun, I'll admit.
Yeah, I bet. So, do you and Aiden, what do you do together? What do you do, for fun as a couple?
A lot of it is walking and having conversations and talking about what we do and what we want to do. And sometimes it's just getting away from the kids for 20 minutes so we can go enjoy the sunshine without someone constantly asking questions. We don't have a lot of crossover interests, so the time we spend together, we'll watch Game of Thrones together, or we'll sit down and eat dinner and maybe play a few things on YouTube or something like that. Right. And we'll, for the other part, he'll be stitching or making stuff, and I'll be writing or podcasting. And we sort of, I've always heard people feel like that's distance, and I don't. I feel like we're doing our things in the same place. That is being together, and sometimes we'll cuddle up while doing that. So
that's fair.
There's a lot of personal time that we're in each other's space but doing different things, and I don't see that as negative. And if you've even seen a picture of us, it's very obvious how much we love each other, and it's an interesting life, we'll say that. I got to go to class here in a few minutes, so I'll just kind of leave that one there before I get off on another tangent about how my husband
Fair
is.
enough. I guess I'll let you go do class stuff. I've kept you for an hour now.
No problem. I just can't be late,
I really appreciate you talking to me.
Sure. Cool.
So thank you very much, and I hope you have a great day.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this.
Have a good one.
See ya.
Bye. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Skeptic Voices, the podcast about getting to know the people in our community. You can find more from Marissa at rizmccool.com or by searching her out on Spreaker.com under Inciting Incident Podcast, FTM, or The Sis Are Getting Out of Hand. There will be links in the show notes. Before I end the episode, I want to let you know about our conference project. My co-host on Brainstorm, Angela, the Shift to Reason planning team, and I have started a GoFundMe with a goal of $5,000. This money will pay for nearly everything for our conference. Donations will go towards the purchase of your ticket, and they'll be greatly appreciated. Probably could earn you a shout out on the odd episode of Brainstorm. We have our dates almost figured out. We're close to nailing down a venue, and we've talked to some great speakers. You can support the Shift to Reason Conference at GoFundMe.com/Shift to Reason Conference 2018 with dashes in between Shift to Reason Conference 2018. As for the rest, you can email me at mail@brainstormblog.net. If you want to hear more of these, you can subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or your favorite podcast player, or you can just stay subscribed to Brainstorm because everything I produce is on that feed regularly. I'd love it if you could go and rate all my various shows and give me a review on iTunes or Facebook, or anywhere else that you rate things, and share the hell out of the shows. You can check out the show notes at thebrainstormpodcast.com or on Spreaker under Brainstorm Podcast or Skeptic Voices. Thanks to our financial supporters, Aaron, Daryl, Destin Sucks, Lachlan, Lisa, Magnus, Michael, Nathan, Positively Skeptical, Rob, Stephanie, and Will. If you want to join their ranks and help the show grow, then you can do that at patreon.com/brainstormpodcast. You can join us for the regular show every second week when we broadcast live on Spreaker. You can find us at Spreaker.com/user/brainstormpodcast or subscribe to us on iTunes or your favorite podcatcher. We always have new content coming out. I think that's everything. Thanks for listening, and remember, the truth matters, but so do people.
Wish everybody well. Here's to us, here's to love, all the times that we messed up.
This is an opinion-based podcast. Each person on the podcast is responsible for their own opinions, and those opinions don't necessarily reflect the views of the rest of the panel, any guests, or anyone associated with the people on the podcast, such as spouses, partners, children, other family members, friends, or employers. No one person speaks for the podcast with the possible exception of Corey, and he doesn't speak for anyone else on the show. The Brainstorm podcast does not represent the views of our sponsors.
We just wanted to say thanks to everyone who listens to us, shares the show, gives us a rating on iTunes or Stitcher, or supports us through Patreon and Gumroad. We don't have a lot of interactions with our listeners, but what we have had proves that we attract some of the best people around. Smart, kind, and cool. An audience truly worthy of the titles hardcore and woo-free. Thanks for helping us make the world a smarter place.